Hello friends, I am Jay the Reader and welcome to the Jay the Reader channel, where we talk about everything Goosebumps, spooky stuff, middle grade horror, stuff like that. Yesterday, I embarked on a journey. I was snowed in and I wanted to watch all of Goosebumps 2023 in one day. I achieved this goal. I watched all 10 episodes throughout the day, and it was a lot. The reason I wanted to do this was because Goosebumps The Vanishing is coming out on January 10th in a few days here, and I really wanted to see, is Goosebumps 2023 as bad as everyone said it was? I did start it back when it came out, and I was not a fan, so I turned it off. But I needed to do this. I wanted to make a video on it to talk about it, and I did reach my goal. I finished it, and yeah, it was a lot. Again, it was kind of brutal towards the end, but let's go through these episodes. Let's talk about the series as a whole. Yeah, let's just dive in. Goosebumps 2023 is an anthology series that takes place in a town called Port Lawrence. It follows a group of teens that are kind of reliving Goosebumps stories in a way. Not really, we'll get into that. And it's also like has an underlying theme that connects all the different stories together. It is what it is. It's not what I wanted from a Goosebumps reboot, but it is what it is. So Port Lawrence as the town, as like the setting, is cool. I like it. It's kind of like a little seaside town. I really dig the setting. They could have done a lot of cool stuff with the setting, and they kind of did, and they kind of didn't. It feels very like a mixed bag. So yeah, these group of teens pretty much discover the different items that are related to the different Goosebumps books in a way. I don't know. They kind of feel related, but they kind of don't, because some of the stories are just, the way they do the stories are completely different than the original source material. So I don't know. Let's just dive into each episode. Let's start with episode 1, Say Cheese and Die. Say Cheese and Die is the very first episode, like I said, and it is the first taste you get of what this series is going to feel like. And it feels very, 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 very CW. If you don't know what I mean by CW, Riverdale. Just think about that. To me, it feels like Riverdale with kind of a Goosebumps skin to start. And it follows a bunch of teens you don't really care about. And that is like a theme that runs through the whole series. So the first episode is Say Cheese and Die. So obviously it involves the camera. It introduces you to a guy named Isaiah who gets his hands on the camera at a party. And yeah, the way he gets it is they go to a haunted house, and this kind of involves the underlying story a bit as well, of a kid who got set on fire there. And it was his camera. So he takes pictures of his friends, and he realizes that, oh no, these pictures are kind of evil. They look like they're dying. Yeah, so that happens. And then he tries to destroy the camera, and that doesn't work because this is a horror show and it never would work that way. And he ends up finding the camera in his locker before a big game, or in the middle of a big game, and it takes his picture by itself, and then it shows him getting injured, and guess what, he gets injured. That's how the episode ends. It does introduce you to Mr. Bratt, who is Justin Long, who plays his part very well. Justin Long plays him perfectly, and that is the one upside to this series, to me at least. And at the end of that episode, he gets possessed by the spirit of the boy who was burnt alive, who was in possession of all these things that end up becoming the Goosebumps stories in this show. So did I like the first episode? I thought it was alright. It didn't feel like Goosebumps. It just felt like any other supernatural teen horror show that is out there these days. Didn't feel like Goosebumps. I honestly forgot I was watching something that was branded Goosebumps until like the credits rolled and it played Travis Scott Goosebumps, and I was like, oh yeah, this is a Goosebumps show. It didn't feel like Goosebumps. It didn't feel like Say Cheese and Die. It just kind of felt like its own thing. It was fun. I'll give it that. Like, I like horror shows that have stupid characters. I love Riverdale. I love all that. So yeah, it was fun. It was good. It is what it was. It wasn't Goosebumps to me. Moving forward, I'm really not going to talk much about the underlying plot. It's kind of important here, but I didn't care about it at all. It pretty much follows someone named Harry Biddle. I'll just give you a quick rundown. He was burnt alive in his house, and he was a weird guy, and he had the possession of Slappy and stuff like that, and you'll learn about that later when I describe that episode, and you learn that he was in possession of Slappy. And yeah, it really had nothing to do with the Goosebumps story, it had nothing to do with the Goosebumps plot. It was just, he was burnt alive, and he has all these possessions, and he wants vengeance for being burnt alive, and now he is going to use his possessions to pretty much haunt this group of teens. And yeah, there's the short story. I don't know, I'm not going to dive much into it. I'm going to talk about if this feels like Goosebumps or not. So yeah. Moving into the second episode, The Haunted Mask. And I had very, 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 very low hopes going into this because The Haunted Mask is my favorite Goosebumps book. And it was mixed. It was really, really, really mixed. This one follows a girl named Isabella. She is obviously kind of like Carly Beth in the original thing, but she's a teen, and she is kind of not noticed, unseen. She's not scared like Carly Beth, she's unseen. And it kind of shows you the night of the party that she found the haunted mask, which looks nothing like the haunted mask from the original episode or the book cover. And I don't usually cuss on this channel, but that pissed me off a bit. And she ends up putting this mask on and becoming a monster, just like the original. The problem with this was, this adaptation was that the mask looked off to me, and it didn't feel authentic like Carly Beth's story felt to me. So that kind of gets points off. And then the mask transforms her face. It doesn't actually like become part of her face. It actually changes her face, which is whatever. But when it transforms into whatever her face looks like, it doesn't even look like what the mask looked like originally, and it doesn't look anything like the original haunted mask. I don't know. This episode was a swing and a miss for me. It had a lot of potential, and it missed. The third episode is called The Cuckoo Clock of Doom, and guilty pleasure, I like this episode. I did. This is when I kind of started getting a feel for the show, and I was like, okay, I can rock with this. This episode is cool. It follows James, and James trips and falls at the party and hits his head on the Cuckoo Clock of Doom, and then he gets stuck in a time loop. Eventually, he ends the time loop, and I forgot to tell you, he can't leave the house. Like, every time he tries to leave the house that the party's being held at, he keeps going back to when he hit his head on the clock. Eventually, he turns off the clock or something. I don't know. And he was able to leave the house. But when he left the house, he realized the next morning that all of the other dimensions where he was going back in time, those James are still out there, and they're evil, and they kidnap him, and he has to figure out how to defeat them. And yeah, when he defeats them, he has to hit him in the head, and he turned into like this green goo. This was another moment where I remembered, oh no, I'm kind of watching a Goosebumps show, because it's green goo and slime. It's the first time I had any of that green slime that is iconic to Goosebumps in this show, so it was really cool to see that. I really liked this episode. I thought it was strong, I thought it was funny, I thought it was great. It felt a little bit more like Goosebumps, and it really gave me some hope going forward, because at this point, after 2 episodes, I was already drained. I was done. Now we'll move on to episode 4, Go Eat Worms. My favorite episode in this whole anthology. I loved this episode. It follows Devin, who finds worms at the party in this house, and he says, do you dare me to eat them? And then he never eats them, but he ends up taking them back home with him, and they end up getting into his body, and they're like parasites. The cool thing I really loved about this episode is that it's so raw and real, and it revolves around trauma, pain, sadness, depression, and it hit all of those marks for me. It was so good, and these worms that are inside of him start making him more daring, and he can't feel pain anymore. And it almost gave me a feeling of reading the Haunted Mask book for the first time, where you can actually feel the pain of Carly Beth. And in this, you could feel the pain of Devin. He lost his dad to, I don't want to say this word on here, but schmooicide, that's how I'm going to say. And that's a tragic thing, and I don't know if I can say that word on here openly without getting, like, age restricted, so I'm just going to say it that way. And he in the end ultimately tries to kind of do that, and he ends up not doing that. So it was a beautiful episode. I thought it was great, and yeah, it was just 2 thumbs up. This really gave me hope for the rest of this series, even more than the Cuckoo Clock of Doom episode. Great stuff. Go Eat Worms was the best episode out of this whole anthology. The next episode is called Reader Beware, and it's pretty much takes a break from any Goosebumps lore, and it goes completely off the rails with this underlying story, and it pretty much explains how Harold Biddle died, and through a scrapbook that a character named Margot finds, and I never mentioned Margot, but there are all these teens that I'll be mentioning in this video were throughout the whole series, but Margot, this is really her forefront here, and she finds this scrapbook, and this scrapbook pretty much tells the story of how leading up to Harold's death, and it's like a magical scrapbook. It takes you back in time by location. If you have the scrapbook in the area that page of the scrapbook was made, you can go back in time and see these visions of the past of what happened to Harold. And this is when they find out that their parents are the ones that were involved with Harold's death. The next episode is called Night of the Living Dummy. I had high hopes for this one, and I did not like this episode at all. It gave the backstory of Slappy, kind of, sort of, and how he related to Harold Biddle and his family and how it came to be. Like I said, Justin Long is in this throughout the whole series, and he's possessed by Harold Biddle at this point. So he finds the kids outside of the house where they last had the scrapbook, where they were going into the past to see what happened to Harold. He invites them in, tells them the story of Slappy, and it's nothing to do with the books. It really has nothing to do with it. It doesn't even follow the same storyline of Slappy Beware, which is a book that kind of tells you the origins of Slappy that l.stine wrote for a 25th anniversary or 30th anniversary, I believe. I did a review on my channel, but it doesn't even follow that either. That book was amazing, by the way. It was just fine. It was a just fine episode. At this point, I was very tired of watching the show because only one episode really stood out to me as amazing, and I was just kind of done. The next episode is called Give Yourself Goosebumps, which is pretty cool because it's a reference to the Give Yourself Goosebumps books, but it is obviously not about that. Give Yourself Goosebumps books, or if you don't know, are just kind of choose your own adventure books that are very rare and very, very heavily sought after. I want to get my hands on some, but back to the point. Give Yourself Goosebumps the episode is about just how they are in the house with who they think Justin Long's character is, Mr. Bratt, their new teacher, and he's really possessed by Harold, and he reveals that to them. He puts them in this alternate universe within the scrapbook, and they kind of have to find their way out of there, which is kind of cool because they had the decisions to make, and it's kind of related to the name of the episode. But it was really run of the mill to me. I was not a big fan of this episode. I thought it was just fine. Then we're moving on to episode 8, You Can't Scare Me, and this pretty much is just more of the same stuff. These teens running around this town trying to stop Harold Biddle and Slappy at this point, because Slappy's back, and it was just fine. Little backstory here, Harold Biddle got Slappy as a teenager, and Slappy manipulated him into thinking all these certain things, and it wasn't true. What really was revealed in this episode is that the parents of these teens didn't kill Harold Biddle to be mean. They were trying to save him from Slappy and get Slappy away from him back in the 90s because they knew that Slappy was a bad guy. But yeah, this episode's cool. It kind of has a redemption arc for Harold. He comes out of Justin Long's character, which is Mr. Bratt, and he becomes loving, and he reunites with his parents, who he actually killed. He killed his parents with a spell. He reunites with them, and yeah, that happens, and then Slappy gets thrown off a cliff, and that could have ended the series right here. And yeah, but it didn't. There's 2 more episodes, and we will talk about them because I don't like them at all. Episode 8 is called Night of the Living Dummy 2, and it is what it is. It's about the teens. They think everything's over. They think all the drama's over. They think all the evilness is gone. They think Slappy's gone. And they go to party in Washington State, and they are there, and then there's drama between the teens. I'm not really getting into the love lives in this video of the teens, but whatever, there's drama. And then Justin Long's character, Mr. Bratt, is trying to write a novel, but he pitches it. They love the novel up in New York, and he needs to redo the ending, yada, yada, yada. And then at the end, he goes to get Slappy to help him redo the ending, and Slappy's in it for like literally 5 minutes. But yeah, that's the episode. Not much. In episode 10, the final episode, Welcome to Horrorland, is weird. It's a weird episode. It brings in a bunch of lore that has nothing to do with like the actual book series or anything that's canon in the books. It just kind of just does its own thing and brings in a character who's evil and can turn people into living dummies. Yeah, it's all right. I mean, it isn't what it is. I don't really like these episodes, these last 2 episodes at all. I just did nothing for me. I thought they should have ended it after episode 8, but cool. That's the series. And then it ends with thinking it's all over again. And then this new character is doing evil stuff, and they try to defeat him. They think it's all over, and then Justin Long's character, Mr. Bratt, looks in the mirror, and yeah, it's not over. He's still possessed. So I don't know. I couldn't follow it, guys. Yeah, that's the best way I can put it. I couldn't follow this series. I couldn't follow the underlying story. I could pick out the Goosebumps references, but it was so convoluted and confusing. I couldn't follow this underlying story of Harold Biddle and then his grandfather, and then I didn't even get into all of that because it's just so nonsensical to me to even get into it if I can't even understand it. It was just so weird to me that they chose to go this direction with this series, and they did, and I don't know. Let's get into my final thoughts. From the jump, you may be asking, do I think this is a bad show? No, I don't think it's a horrible show. I think it's just fine. I think it's bad in the context of Goosebumps to a certain extent because a lot of these Goosebumps references didn't really feel like Goosebumps to me. But do I think it would made a cool teen horror thing if it didn't really have the Goosebumps branding? Yeah. I think it'd be a fun, stupid teen horror show. And that's the best way I can describe it. A dumb, stupid teen horror show with Goosebumps skin on top, with a Goosebumps skin on top. And that is what it is. I mean, we got what we got. It's cool to see a resurgence in Goosebumps after all those years in media. I mean, we got the Jack Black movie and then the second one, like Haunted Halloween or whatever. And I loved the Jack Black movie, and we'll be talking about that on this channel. But yeah, it was what it was. It was cool to see a new Goosebumps show, but it wasn't what I wanted. And from what I've seen online, what a lot of other fans wanted, we felt let down. I don't agree with when people say that it's the worst thing ever. I think that it's just not true. It's not the worst thing ever. You do kind of get invested in the friend group. You do kind of get invested in the story. I didn't really care about Harold Biddle's story. I don't know. The story was all right. It was cool to see these iconic stories kind of come back to life and to the names of the episodes be relevant to the books. It was all right. It was all right. It was just meh. What I really think they should have done was just kind of recreated the Goosebumps stories and did like standalone episodes for each of them like they did back in the 90s, but with a better budget and just better everything. That would have been something I would have been obsessed with, but they didn't do that, sadly. And I know Goosebumps The Vanishing that comes out on the 10th of this month isn't doing that either. It is another anthology, but I have hope for it because I don't think Goosebumps 2023 was horrible, and I think they're going to learn from their mistakes and do it better and just give us something that we want. They're going to do something that the fans want. It follows Stay Out of the Basement. It's going to be cool. But yeah, let's get back to Goosebumps 2023 and wrap this video up. The biggest problem with Goosebumps 2023 is that it does not feel like Goosebumps. That's the biggest problem. It feels like any other teen show, and that's kind of what it is with the Goosebumps skin. And I don't want to say they made it just to make money, but it kind of felt like that at some points. But from what I've read, l.stine had no involvement in this show, and I don't think he's going to have any involvement in the one that's upcoming either, sadly. But man is old. He's in his 80s. What is he? Yeah, he's in his 80s. He's old. But it didn't feel like Goosebumps. That's the biggest problem. But if you want to watch a fun, sometimes fun, teen horror romp, do it. I would recommend it. I don't think it's the worst thing ever, and I think you may enjoy it better than I did. Remember, these are just my opinions. This isn't the end-all be-all here. Don't get mad at my opinions. If you think this show's the best thing ever, good for you. I am so happy that you think that. I just don't think it's the best thing ever, but I don't think it's the worst, and I think it's definitely worth the watch. If you guys made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. If you could hit that subscribe button, it would mean the world to me. What we do on this channel is we usually talk about like books and stuff like that, but I'm also talking more and more about Goosebumps episodes. I want to start talking about Are You Afraid in the Dark and stuff like that. Middle grade horror is my jam, so yeah, I would love for you guys to stick around and check out more of my content and become part of the Jay the Reader family. God bless you guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.